report card. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited about this webinar. As far as I know, this is the first time that we are presenting this as a webinar, so I hope that you enjoy it. Raritan Headwaters is a 501c3 nonprofit conservation organization. We've been around for over half of a century, and we continue to serve our watershed community to ensure clean, safe water for all. Wrong way. Excuse me. This is our watershed area, the Raritan River, also known as Watershed Management Area number 8, the north and the south branch of the Raritan River, and all of its tributaries are the source of water for over 1.5 million people downstream. Understandably, it is crucial that we protect our precious natural resource. And this is all of the work that we do in Raritan Headwaters. I love this map here because this gives us a very clear idea of where in our watershed we need to protect and where in our watershed we need to restore. And as the green gets greener, it means we need to work harder to preserve those lands. As the blue gets darker, these are areas that we really need to focus in on restoring. And to do that, we do a lot of things here at Raritan Headwaters. We offer a well testing program, we preserve land, we reach out into the community with education, and this is an outreach tool that we use, Watershed Tools for Local Leaders. We're planting trees, we're monitoring water quality in our streams, rivers, even a lake up in Bud Lake. And we encourage residents to practice river-friendly practices. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Christy McDonald. She has been with Raritan Headwaters for about 10 years. She is the Director of Science here. She holds a PhD in ecology from Rutgers University, where she focused her research on learning how species respond to human-caused stressors. She directs our science team of talented fellow scientists and practitioners to monitor, study, and understand the impacts of land use and climate change on stream ecosystems, working closely with municipalities and other partners to implement green infrastructure, riparian restoration, and other best management practices to restore and protect our watershed. Thank you very much, Christy.
Thanks, Tracy.
Let me unshare
Hi,
my
everybody.
screen. Oh no. Oops.
Thank you so much for coming to hear about the state of the Upper Raritan River watershed, where most of us here today live. Streams and groundwater provide a way of measuring the environmental health of a watershed because everything we do in our homes, flush down the toilet, put on our lawns and gardens, is going to end up in our water. Our stream monitoring and well test programs are like an annual blood test, only they assess the health of not our individual bodies, but our shared environment. Before you hear about the results of what we found in the water in 2024, I want to point out a few important things about RHA, our water quality monitoring, and the role you play in supporting it. RHA is here as the watershed watchdog. We're making sure our water is clean for people and wildlife. We're the only organization monitoring over 80 stream sites every year throughout our watershed. DEP tests 5 years, and so we fill in those years in between. We're the only organization that is conducting well testing for families so that people who are on private well water will know what's in their water. In addition to providing that information, we're also able to gather data on the health of our groundwater. And otherwise, it would not be available to us because most people test their wells when they sell their homes. But we're promoting that people should be testing their well water every year. And you're going to hear a lot about that from Sam. Our stream data are of the highest tier for use by EPA and DEP for regulatory decisions, enforcing the Clean Water Act in our communities. For example, in 2019, we were able to upgrade 200 miles of streams to Category 1 protections, giving them wider stream buffers and additional water quality protections. In addition to monitoring the health of our watershed, we are also actively doing work to protect what is doing well and restore what is damaged. We're actively preserving wetlands and forests, which are critical for a healthy watershed. We are restoring forest buffers along streams to absorb floodwaters from extreme storms related to climate change. We're removing dams to restore connections between our streams and rivers and the ocean. And we're also planning for better stormwater control in urban areas by replacing pavement with green infrastructure like rain gardens and bioswales. And then finally, we're fostering habitat stewardship to protect native biodiversity. And the list actually goes on of all the different things that we're doing here at Raritan Headwaters. In a minute, you're going to hear from some of our other amazing science staff, Samantha LaRocca, who runs our well test program, and Benjamin Harris, our watershed scientist who manages our stream monitoring program. And you're also going to see data displayed in maps created by our GIS director, Melissa Thomas. But before that, I just want to say one more thing, and that is that you can play a part in protecting our watershed by joining us. Go to raritanheadwaters.org and click on volunteering your time, donating funds, because all the work we're doing is extremely expensive and we need your support, or becoming a certified river-friendly resident or business and making a difference in your own homes and backyards. So without further ado, I want to introduce Sam LaRocca, our well test program manager, and she's going to start with the 2024 report on our groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Just going to pull up my screen. Alrighty. And is everybody able to see my screen just fine? I'm going to take that as a yes. Alrighty. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tracy and Christy. A little bit about what we will be diving into in this groundwater portion of the State of the Watershed presentation. We're going to discuss a little bit about the well test program itself, its importance, and then a little bit about the data that was collected, some of the events that happened in 2024 that were important to note. And then, of course, if anybody has any questions, we'll have some Q&A at the end. Alrighty, a little bit about the community well testing program. RHA has been testing wells in the Upper Raritan watershed since 1974. And the importance of this is because 80% of homes in the Upper Raritan watershed are on well water, right? So in New Jersey, you are not required to test your well unless you are buying or selling a home. That's the only time you are required by law to do any type of testing and or remediation, right? So we always encourage residents to test their well for a variety of reasons that I will be getting into. But of course, we are here to make that as easy as possible, as affordable as possible, and as convenient and educational as possible. That is the goal of the community well testing program. We offer testing in two different ways. We offer testing year-round through our Flemington and Bedminster offices. Residents can come and pick up a test kit and then drop it back off 12 months of the year, as long as it's not a major holiday. Pretty much we are able to provide those well testing kits for our residents. And then in order to make the testing process even more convenient, we actually partner with a significant number of municipalities within the watershed. I believe this year, or excuse me, 2024 was 22 separate municipalities throughout the entire year. And we collaborate to host a community well test event inside that town itself. We pick a date on the calendar, usually in the spring or fall, and we bring all of the well testing materials, usually to a municipal building, local park, for example, and we bring all of our well testing materials, knowledge, bottles, instructions on that day and time to the municipality. So residents don't have to drive hopefully nearly as far. They can come with as many questions as they have, or they can pick up a pre-ordered test kit. And then we host about 22 of these throughout the year. And this is a really great way to strengthen our partnerships with our local municipalities. And if you look down in that little Venn diagram in the bottom left, I really love this Venn diagram. It's a great description of the community well testing program as a whole, right? We've got Raritan Headwaters, the municipalities that we're partnering with, and the state certified lab that is analyzing all of our test results. We are not only advocating for improved public health within the watershed, we are educating a wide variety of residents on the importance of testing, the frequency recommendations, and the helping them understand why testing is important, how to do so. But lastly, residents might not even realize that they are also being citizen scientists, right? All of that data that we're collecting through these well water tests are actually giving us really great insight into the health of the groundwater in our watershed. And we're collecting that data, and we will be discussing a bit of that at the end of, or the middle to the end of this presentation. And it is giving us a great insight into the health of the groundwater within our area that we might not have otherwise. Alrighty, so we talked a little bit about who we are as the well testing program, but now let's talk about why testing your well is important, right? The basics are very important to discuss before we get into a lot of that data. So as I mentioned before, you are responsible for the safety of your well water if you own a home with a well in New Jersey. There can be a variety of health effects from all these different contaminants. They can be carcinogenic. Some might be particularly harmful to infants or pregnant people. So these are things that we always want to keep in mind when we're in the under the lens of public health for well water testing. Many of these contaminants you cannot see, smell, or taste. Our motto is you don't know unless you test. The only way to know what's in your water is to test it, because many times these harmful contaminants don't have any discerning factors. Additionally, contaminants can occur both naturally, in naturally occurring deposits within the bedrock and soil, or they can also occur through human activity. Right, so some common sources may include, fertilized land, household pipes, gas stations, landfills, septic systems, and also stormwater runoff. But noting stormwater runoff, I really wanted to take now as a really important time to bring up the relationship between surface water and groundwater, right? Ben Harris will be presenting his information on the 2024 surface water report, and I'm here to really highlight the relationship between the two. We don't want to forget how connected surface water and groundwater truly are, because while groundwater, recharges to the surface through springs and supplies streams with base flow, the same is for surface water, right? Surface water seeps into the ground and then recharges the underlying aquifer. And any stormwater runoff, during storms or heavy rains, any type of contamination that might be in the surface water then has the ability to enter the groundwater, your well, for example, and vice versa. So just because we can't see groundwater does not mean that it is not an incredibly vital resource to be protected. So I always like to highlight that. Alrighty, so this might seem like a lot of words on the page. I'm not encouraging anybody to look particularly deeply into this menu of testing options on the left. I'm really utilizing it as an example to let residents know all the different contaminants that we offer, right? We base our menu off the Private Well Testing Act deemed by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And we offer discounted prices from our state certified lab, so residents can kind of pick and choose which contaminants that they would like to test for. And there are health officials that recommend frequency of testing. Of course, bacteria and nitrates are recommended annually. That's going to be our basic kit for basic potability of the well. And of course, if you go to our website, take a look at our menu in a little bit more detail, you'll see like lead, for example, recommended every 5 years if your home was built before 1987, arsenic every 5 years, at least once for radionuclides, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really just an example of all the different contaminants and more that we offer through the Raritan Headwaters well testing program. So now I'll talk a little bit about the events that occurred in 2024, particularly regarding to well water quality and concerns. We have the 4.8 magnitude earthquake that occurred right in Hunterdon County, right in the center of our watershed, right? So it's important to note that natural events such as earthquakes can influence water quality. And we noticed this by receiving a number of phone calls immediately following the earthquake. So residents reached out to Raritan Headwaters as a resource to find out more information about the concerns that they had, right? So what we did is we responded quickly to these concerns from residents. We actually created a web page and a blog on our website designated to important information for well owners following an earthquake, right? So we had residents be mindful of inspection, monitoring, and then potential future testing that is recommended post-earthquake for things like bacteria, nitrates, and arsenic. And it did occur, not that an earthquake is great at any point of the season, but it happened to occur just weeks before our first spring community well testing event, meaning we were able to further educate residents just for like weeks, if not months, following the earthquake about these concerns and about spreading that information about the importance of well water testing post-earthquake, because it's always very important to be cautious after a major event. And not only did we have an earthquake in 2024, we also had a drought. And New Jersey is still currently in a drought. I like to highlight that we are currently in a drought warning, so something definitely to keep in mind. And droughts can have an effect not only on groundwater quality, but also groundwater quantity. We had residents calling and letting us know that their wells had gone dry. We had residents calling asking if there should be any specific tests that should be conducted during a drought, for example. So we were able to spread that information, given that concentrations of naturally occurring metals like iron, manganese, and arsenic, for example, can actually increase during a drought. When there's less water within the aquifer, the concentration of those naturally occurring metals can actually increase. Your water might be getting pulled from a different part of an aquifer than it had previously. So it's always important to check in on many of these contaminants, as they can have changes in their concentrations compared to a pre-drought scenario. So, coming back to the importance of surface water and groundwater relationships, the rate of groundwater recharge during a drought is going to be very slow, right? So in order to minimize this, is that we want to take important steps to save water this spring, right? During a drought, it's important to save water, not only for the benefit of the environment and surface water, but also to help benefit groundwater recharge, so that the groundwater itself is not being depleted as significantly. So I encourage everybody to follow these 10 simple steps this spring to help minimize this issue. Alrighty, so we chatted a little bit about some of the events that occurred in 2024. So what I was able to do is I pulled together the Well Testing 2024 report card. So just some important things to take away from this are that Raritan Headwaters tested 1,328 taps in 2024. This was an increase from 2023, and a significant amount of homes were tested in order to find out if their well water was safe to drink for them and their families. Given that residents have the ability to choose between 1 or 12 different individual tests, we had 6,406 individual tests conducted in 2024. We are very proud of that number. And you can actually, if you take a look over at the report card itself, I really love it. It's a great visual. It's a really great snapshot to see how many of each contaminant were tested for, the very quick overview of the detections compared to failures, etc. But I always want to have everybody keep in mind that this is just a overview, right? When it comes to testing your own well water, we highly encourage every home to test individually. You can utilize maps and data as a great indication of what might be most commonly detected in your area, but we always know that you don't know what's in your water unless you test it. You know, the depth of your well can have an effect even between like you and your neighbor. You're pulling from different parts of the aquifer. There might be different levels of contamination. So we always encourage each individual home to test their well, but this data is a really great resource to utilize, not only to get a snapshot of our groundwater within the watershed, but also to see what might be commonly detected near your home or your well itself. And this document, the report card itself, can be found on our website. If you want to go in, take a little bit more look in detail, I highly encourage you to do so. And give me feel free to give me a call or an email if you struggle to find it or would like it in PDF form. So just some common trends that we see throughout the Raritan Headwaters region are high arsenic levels, right? So the reason for this is the Piedmont physiographic province, right? So we have the Piedmont region, which I circled in red, which is that light blue that goes through the center of the upper region of New Jersey, compared to the Highlands, which is that slightly darker northern portion within our watershed, right? So the Piedmont region is where arsenic is going to be more mobile and commonly detected, naturally occurring from the rocks and the soil. So in the Highlands region, you're going to be a little bit less likely in comparison to the Piedmont region to have high levels of naturally occurring arsenic. But from year to year, we see very similar trends in many townships that are known to have high levels of arsenic within the Piedmont region, where we always encourage residents as one of those specific carcinogenic contaminants to test for example, East Amwell, Raritan Township, Branchburg Township, Delaware, I could go on, are known to have significant levels of arsenic in their well water. And this map is a great reason to help understand why that might be in the southern half of our watershed. And if you're curious and you want to go in and take a look for yourself, we have these wonderful on website. You can actually go in. We have data from 2011 to 2020 within these maps collected from the Raritan Headwaters Community Well Test Program. You can search under a variety of different contaminants, see if any of your neighbors by inputting your home address. It's all confidential, so it's within a 1 square mile region, I do believe, where residents can go in and see if any tests have been conducted in those years surrounding their home. A great indicator to encourage you to test if you know that some of your neighbors may have come back with some high detections of certain contaminants. And this is where all of that citizen science that of collecting that groundwater data is being put into really great practical use. And I highly encourage anybody with a well or without a well to go to this website, search around these maps. It's a wonderfully educational resource, and we're hoping to continue to update them as we move forward. So just a little plug for this great resource for everybody. And I'm going to wrap up on a very, common issue, PFAS, 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 purin, polyfluoroalkyl substances, whatever you want to call them. They are a newly emerging man-made contaminant. You might have been hearing about them more in the news. They're going to be chemicals that are encouraged to make products more water resistant, heat resistant. Think Teflon, Scotchgard, firefighting foams. They're not only found in industry, but they're also commonly found in consumer goods and products, as well as biosolids or land applied sludge. And as more data is being collected about PFAS in groundwater, we are seeing significant levels of PFAS within our watershed, as well as throughout New Jersey and the United States. It is nicknamed forever chemicals for a reason. And this year, in 2024, we had a 21% detection rate under EPA limits, but we had a 63% exceedance rate of EPA limits for the 183 wells that were tested in 2024. And that exceedance rate and that detection rate or even higher throughout the 3 full years that we've been testing for these chemicals. We're able to offer them at a significantly reduced price, knowing that they are already a very expensive test to be conducted, so that accessibility in order to test for something that requires a lot of effort at the lab at a much lower discounted cost makes it a lot more accessible for our residents. But because residents had so many questions about this, people had heard about it on the news, et cetera, we decided to utilize by making a resource for our residents for the website where residents could go on. We're calling it the PFAS Toolkit. I highly encourage everybody to go and take a look at it. It's a very detailed resource on our website outlining frequently asked questions about this contaminant of PFAS, various health effects, news, the data that's constantly changing. We're still learning about this contaminant, month to month even. And then the importance of testing and options for remediation. So, given that we've had a lot of concern over these emerging chemicals, we decided to move forward by providing residents with a really, one-stop shop resource to educate themselves on this particular contaminant, just as we encourage residents to do so with every contaminant on our list. If you go to our website, you'll see lots of fact sheets, resources, etc. This is just us being able to take that one step further, much like our arsenic toolkit page and our lead toolkit page. And finally, one example of why that toolkit was so important and why we decided to move forward and make it is because of a situation right on the Lambertville and West Amwell Township border, where we had a group of concerned residents reach out to Raritan Headwaters in 2024, letting us know that they were concerned about potential PFAS contamination in their neighborhood. We were able to coordinate partnerships with not only the residents, but also the Lambertville and West Amwell townships themselves, the Board of Health in West Amwell Township. And when we communicated and partnered with our lab, we were actually able to test 46 homes right in these neighborhoods that were concerned with significant PFAS levels. And of these homes, unfortunately, the majority of them did come back exceeding the EPA guideline, or excuse me, the EPA maximum contaminant level. But when we were able to test all 46 of these homes, we were able to ensure that these concerned residents received their results in a really timely manner in order to begin making informed decisions for themselves, their families, and deciding if treatment options were something that they wanted to pursue. So we were able to, very quickly respond to a group of residents that were actively concerned, reached out to us as a resource, as a trusted information source at Raritan Headwaters. And this is just one example of the Well Test program's ability to respond quickly to concerns, provide affordable testing and resources, and above all, ensure that residents are consuming clean and safe drinking water to not only protect themselves and their family, but also the watershed. And that is just about it for me. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, very interesting results, Sam, and I look forward to diving into those in a little bit more detail. I will just reiterate for everyone the interconnectedness of these two systems. And while water testing may be focused more on human health impacts, surface water is for sure an equally important metric to understanding the health of our ecosystems and humans alike, because they are flowing together. What's happening upstream is happening equally down below. So I'm excited to discuss some of our 2024 results with you all of our surface water monitoring program. So we in the surface water monitoring team are very focused on understanding the impacts of humans on our waterways and in what ways we can protect and restore these waterways to improve the ecological health. Before I get too in the weeds of our results, I would just love to highlight that this is a volunteer stream monitoring program, and we wouldn't be able to do this level of work without the many dedicated volunteers, like the two amazing people pictured here. Um, we are able to monitor on any given year 70 to 80 sites annually in June and July. And we have a wonderful team of over 100 volunteers every year who are certified and trained with us and with the state to be collecting this high-level data. And just like Christy mentioned, this data is being used for regulatory purposes. So we are able to provide the state and the EPA with really in-depth and specific data about our waterways due to the very dedicated community members. So this is a quick little map of our stream monitoring sites in 2024. So our monitoring program aims to understand the watershed health within our full watershed management area of the North and South Branch watersheds, the headwaters up here. So we target each of the sub-watersheds within our watershed. So it's sort of like a little nesting doll situation. There's the big watershed, but then there's smaller watersheds within, like the small one of Bud Lake up in the northern region. So we have water monitoring stations at each of these locations where we collect a variety of data that I'll get into. And then these are all pooled together into a watershed report card that we release annually. And I will keep you anticipating on our overall watershed grade until the end. So our first sort of step in our monitoring program in the summer is our biological monitoring. So this monitoring is really focused on the macroinvertebrate communities within our waterways. Macroinvertebrates are an amazing indicator species or group of species because of their varying levels of sensitivity. They are also an incredibly diverse group of individuals. So there's varying levels of sensitivity, like I mentioned, different types of feeding groups, and just a variety of different types of macroinvertebrates. So this is a quick little snapshot at a variety of macroinvertebrates from worms to snails to larval insects and crayfish. So we use these macroinvertebrates to eventually calculate a high gradient macroinvertebrate index of each site within our watershed. The DEP uses this index, HGMI, the acronym for it, to determine the health of a waterway based on the macroinvertebrate community. And this is due to their varying levels of sensitivity, which makes them indicator species. So a lot of different pieces go into the HGMI, some of which are the feeding group assemblages, the percent of the sensitive species we have in a given sample, and also the species richness, among many other, which eventually allows us to calculate this HGMI, or this high gradient macroinvertebrate index. This year, we found a 71% pass rate of our HGMI. This is based on surface water quality standards that the state sets forth. There has to be a certain level within this index. It has to reach a certain point for that community and that waterway to be considered passing. So this map on the right is showing the distribution of passing and failing sub-watersheds within our headwaters region. Orange is failing and blue is passing. And this is based on either one or up to 3 or 4 monitoring sites that are within that sub-watershed and the macroinvertebrate community. So a bit of a C minus for the macroinvertebrates. Every year, there's a little bit of variability within these communities because sometimes a community may just be doing better than other years, but we have been collecting this data at some sites since the early 90s. And long-term data in this regard is pretty rare. So we have the ability to see how many of these waterways have been doing over a long stretch of time and assess whether these communities are declining or improving, and then target restoration needs within our watershed. So I have a graph here to just show some changes through time or lack thereof. This HGMI is that index that ranges from 0 to 100, and then we have our year on the bottom, ranging from 1992 to 2024. We've had an increase in the number of sites through time that we've been monitoring. So in the early 90s, there were a select few sites that were being monitored on the South Branch Raritan. But through time, we've had an increased number of sites that we've monitored, which is denoted with the shading of these boxes. So the darker blue that you see in some of these boxes means that we've had more sites monitored that year. So I don't put this up here to give you any sort of indication of what has happened over time across our whole watershed. I'm just showing this to show you that very generally speaking, we're not seeing major declines in this sort of community metric, which is important. It's showing some stability and resilience in the face of the many anthropogenic impacts or human impacts on our waterways. We can't really make any broad sweeping conclusions of 1992 versus 2024, for example, just because of the differing number of sites and differing sites in general that were monitored. But we can compare some specific sites. So some of these South Branch sites that were monitored in 1992, early 90s, were continued to be monitored all throughout time up till this year. So we can compare those sites and see some specific trends. Some of our sites through time are declining. Those macroinvertebrates aren't doing as well, which is indicating to us a decline in water quality and or habitat quality for those organisms. And some communities are actually improving, which is a good sign, and that's showing that restoration efforts or water quality are doing better within our region. So this is just to give you a little snapshot of what's happening and the kind of data we have with our macroinvertebrate collections. So the next piece of our summer monitoring is our physical monitoring, which we do through habitat assessments. So we utilize a scored rubric or scoring sheet that is used throughout the state and beyond to assess varying aspects of habitats within our waterways, both within the streams and also within the riparian zones or shores and the floodplains. So just a few pieces of aspects that we assess include the stability of a stream bank. So how compact and well stable that stream bank is, if there's a lot of trees along there that are holding in sediments and filtering out nutrients, if the floodplain is full of life and plants and diversity. We assess the amount of erosion that is occurring along stream banks. Erosion is a big issue in our watershed from stormwater management and the lack of trees along stream banks. We look at sedimentation in waterways. Sedimentation is a layering or depositing of sediments within our stream floors or stream bottoms. This impacts the ability for life to live in these rivers because a lot of these smaller organisms, like our insects and crayfish and small fish, like to hide out in cobbles and rocks. And when we end up with a lot of sedimentation from erosion, then we're lessening the amount of habitat for them. And then we also assess flow within these waters. Given that we are a headwaters region, a lot of our streams and rivers should be flowing quite evenly throughout a year and pretty stable in their flow. Damming and changes in hydrology impacts the ability for these rivers to flow, and it will slow down the waterways. So that's another piece that we look at. Just like our macroinvertebrate communities, we utilize a pass-fail system based on standards set forth by New Jersey DEP. This year, we had a 70% fail rate within each of our sites. And this map is showing that pass-fail system across all of our sub-watersheds. So this orange is failing, this green is passing, or sorry, blue. This passing area, it's sort of mimicking a corridor within our watershed of really nicely preserved forests and healthy stream banks. And then we have some work to be done within the north and south areas of our watershed. Every year there are shifts in the scoring depending on what's exactly happening within that stream during a given year. There may be more woody debris, which is good for a stream. There may be really slow and low flow if we're in a drought, which is going to lessen the scoring of the habitat assessment. So just like macroinvertebrates, there are natural fluctuations within this assessment, but it's something that's important to look at over time. And some of these specific individual metrics like erosion are really important tools. The last part of our monitoring is our chemical monitoring program, which it goes over a variety of different parameters. Um, the first one is nitrate and phosphate, which are nutrients in waterways. So these are sort of like the chemicals, in some cases, they are the chemicals you may put on your lawn or your farmlands if you're a farmer. So just like nutrients or fertilizers help plants to grow on land, they're doing the same thing in our waterways. But instead of having really bountiful crops, we are ending up with really intense algae blooms or overgrowth of aquatic plants or aquatic weeds. We also look at chloride in our waterways, which is an ion present in salt. Specifically, we're using this to assess the effect of road salts on our waterways. We look at temperature in our waterways. Given that we're headwaters area, our streams should be very cool, cold, which is important for many fish, especially trout, which are super sensitive to warmer water. Um, we look at dissolved oxygen, which is very tightly correlated with temperature. The warmer the water, the less oxygen is able to stay put in that water. You can sort of think of like a boiling pot on the stove. Once it starts really getting hot and boiling, it's bubbling a lot, and all of that air is escaping. Our rivers may not be boiling, but even a couple degrees change really massively impacts the amount of oxygen that's able to stay in that water, which again is impacting sensitive species like trout. We look at pH, which is like how acidic or basic the water is, and then conductivity, which is sometimes used as a proxy of salt, um, but is the ability for an electrical current to be carried through water, which is driven by the dissolved ions. So things like salt, but other ions like nutrients, potassium, magnesium, really anything that has a charge that's in our waterways. So, like our other maps, we have these sort of maps for all of our parameters. So I put oxygen and temperature together here because they're very interconnected. Our waterways tend to do very well with oxygen and typically pretty well with temperature as well. So even in areas where temperature is a little bit too high, our oxygen level is stable, and we can thank our brooks and our babbling brooks and cobbles and riffles and little waterfalls for helping to keep oxygen levels high. Um, Temperature tends to fail in cases of trout presence in a stream. So temperature regulations through the state are more stringent when we have naturally reproducing trout populations in a given area, because those trout are very sensitive to temperature, to high temperature levels. So that standard is far lower than a stream that does not have trout present in it. So most of these streams are naturally trout production, so their standards are more stringent. This is conductivity and chloride maps. They tend to be very highly correlated, but not in all cases. So I showed these together because oftentimes conductivity is used as a proxy for salt or chloride. But certain cases that's not always true. I'll just highlight one little spot over here in Bedminster Township. Um, it had very high chloride, but conductivity remained pretty stable. And just up here a little bit, very high conductivity, sort of in the PPAC headwaters, but very low chloride. So this correlation isn't always holding true, but overall, we can typically combine the two of them. Chloride, even though it's only has a 55% fail, a lot of the time during our monitoring, especially when we're doing monitoring in the fall, and this is just summer data, um, the chloride levels are reaching really dangerous highs for aquatic life. So chloride should be pretty low in fresh water. Fresh water is fresh because it lacks any natural salts. Has a little bit, but not levels like seawater. Oversalting of our roadways and certain treatments for our drinking water systems increase salt levels in our waterways, which is freshwater salinization. And that is a big issue around here, especially during the winter and early spring when we have salt from roadways and runoff. So we reach levels of chloride that are 5 to 10 times higher than they should be, according to state standards. And so that starts to really negatively impact life within our waterways, including sensitive fish, but also their larvae and eggs. So nitrate and phosphate, again, are those fertilizing nutrients. We tend to see very low nitrate levels in our waterways. Uh, Nitrate or nitrogen in general is a limiting nutrient, so it's used up pretty quickly, and we don't see very high abundances of it. Phosphate, on the other hand, tends to be pretty high, especially in areas with more agriculture. Phosphorus tends to be the nutrient that is in our fertilizers. So we every year tend to see very high phosphate down in this Neshannock region where there's more agriculture, and therefore tends to be more fertilizers being applied. And these aren't just from synthetic fertilizers, but it can also be occurring from septic waste, which may be more of the case in the northern areas that lack agriculture. The last one I'll show is pH. Again, how acidic or basic water is. pH should lie between about 6.5 to 8.5, which is a relatively neutral pH. Your drinking water is probably about 7.5 to 8. Our water around here is naturally more basic, so it has a bit more of a high pH. And that's just because of the underground, our groundwater and underlying geology depositing ions into our water that are just driving a change in pH. So our water is typically a bit on the higher side, around 8. pH tends to get very high, which is the reason for all of these fails in our watershed this year, when we have an overabundance of algae in our waterways, which is driven by those fertilizing nutrients. Algae are photosynthesizing, so they are just like our land plants. They are using sunlight, carbon dioxide, and nutrients to create their own energy. When algae are too abundant, they are drawing in all of the carbon dioxide in the water, and they're shifting the pH to make it far higher than it should be. And this starts to impact aquatic life as well, especially the ability for certain larval organisms to really develop well. So we take all of these many data and pull them into an overall report, and assign a grading system. So just like in grade school, if you got a 90% on a test, that test was graded an A minus, or you may have gotten an F. So we do the same thing for our watershed, where we pool all of our data together, and eventually our whole watershed's data into a grade. So this year we got a C minus. There's no one specific thing that has to be targeted to get this grade up. And there's no one specific or two specific sub-watersheds or regions that really need targeted action. It's a combination of many parameters and many areas of land that are in need of some targeted action. Overall, there are a lot of goods in our waterways. So we lack overabundance of nitrates. We lack too much turbidity, which is the clarity of water. Dissolved oxygen is this DO. Totally dissolved solids, which I didn't show that one, and oxygen are all really good. Now there's some bads in our waterways too, which is not unique to the Raritan headwaters. It's something that's happening globally. Chloride and specific conductivity which are both sort of proxies for salt, are an issue not just here but everywhere. Too much road salt is salinizing our fresh water, and there are ways to get around that while still being safe on our roadways. And habitat scores are driving this grade down as well. And there's some sort of intermediary aspects as well with HGMI and phosphate. So we did get a C minus overall, but this sort of system and grading really gives us an ability to focus in on certain areas that are doing really well and may use some of that preservation, but maybe these areas that are more red that really need some targeted restoration and action, outreach to municipalities and community members. So I'm happy to target any questions you may have right now, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Always happy to nerd out about any of this. And again, this is all a volunteer-based program with our community. So A big shout out and a big thank you to all of our volunteers. And if anyone has interest in getting involved in any of this work, please don't hesitate to reach out. It is a lot of fun, and a nice way to get out in nature. So thank you all.
And I'm gonna keep my silence on, so why don't you just go through the chat and answer some of the questions?
Okay, I will target this first question, how the C minus grade compares to previous years. Um, so the C minus is pretty in line with what we've been seeing in the past recently. It's hard to exactly get a comparison between this year and previous years because every year there's a little bit of a different combination of the tests we're running. This year there were a bit more than previous years. Um, so C minus is pretty average for us. Um, certain things were definitely an improvement. Um, like temperature was definitely better this year than it had been previously, which was a surprise to me. But something like habitat did not do as well this year as it has previously. Okay, Alan, I'm just reading your question here. Yes, so specific trends like that aren't always something we are targeting in our work, but that is definitely something that comes to light in our habitat assessments. So we know that these sort of pests and tree death diseases are causing losses in our riparian zone, which is definitely going to be reflected in our habitat assessments. But it's not something that our scoring sheet or assessment rubric is specifically targeting to assess. But those sort of situations, it's not only going to decrease habitat score, but trees are very important for shading of waterways. So they're going to lessen temperature and therefore increase oxygen levels in our waterways. So it's sort of going to cause a ripple effect into our biotic systems. And bank erosion is definitely increasing from higher storm rainfall. And that's something that we're likely going to see increase in intensity through the years with changes in our climate. And it's not always just from intensity of rainfall, it can also be from the ways that we as humans divert our water. So we use culverts and storm drains to funnel in water and pump it directly into a streamway. And so we are then lacking the ability for our ground to absorb the water and recharge our groundwater, and instead just funneling it straight into the water, which is then going to be very intense for a stream that should not be taking that level of water all at once and going to cause erosion.
Ron wanted to know. Monitoring that.
It's on there, Brian. It may have just been missing a label. Since there were some that were overlying each other, they may have the labels may have gotten cut off, but I think it's on there. I'll double check.
I think Renee's question saying, can you give us 3 actions we can take this year to improve our streams? It's a really great question. And then I can chime in at the end with 3 ways to improve your wells as well.
I would love to answer the question. I could give a couple. Hi, can you hear me, Ben? No. Hello, Renee. That's a great question. Well, I could think of one thing that you could do. You could plant a lovely rain garden in your yard to capture stormwater that may be coming off of your roof or your driveway. And that way, that rainwater can infiltrate into the groundwater and it'll get cleaned as it infiltrates down instead of immediately rushing into our near, oh, you have one already. Yay. Instead of it immediately rushing into the nearest storm drain and into the nearest stream or river. Um, yeah, but maybe you could help a friend or a neighbor plant one. That would be awesome. I bet Christy would have some great suggestions of things that you could do.
I think that was really toward the top of my list, as well as if you do have streams in your municipality, you might want to get involved in making sure that those stream buffers are forested, do some tree plantings locally, get involved. Also with your municipality, get involved by going to some of the planning board meetings and council meetings, maybe join your environmental commission and get to know what's happening locally in your town. And maybe I should pass it on to Ben to add one more thing.
Yes, so I could list off 3,000, but a few that I think are easy for a homeowner and won't take any sort of big financial step to you. First, something that I'm very passionate about is limiting what we are putting on our land that should not be there. I'll start with road salts. Obviously, road salts are very important for public safety, but there are alternatives. You can create a brine solution. It is a saltwater mix. Obviously, we're still putting salt there, but it uses less salt than pure rock salt. And when you're using brine, that brine sticks to your cement or your pavement and is not immediately bouncing off into the soil like a road salt does. If you tend to eat a lot of pickles or boiled beets, that sort of pickle brine or beet brine is identical to a road salt or road brine solution. So you can save your pickle juice. Maybe you have a fridge in your garage, and pour your pickle juice on your cement instead of using road salts. You're still depositing some salt into the soils and the waterways, but it's less than a rock salt would. And it's also something that's going to end up in our water regardless, whether you're pouring it down your tap or throwing it in your garage or in your garbage. Another thing that is important to think about when you're applying stuff to land is fertilizers. If you have ever been to Bud Lake, you've probably seen it's very green. This is not unique to Bud Lake. It's lakes all over the world are greening. The process of that is called eutrophication. Eutrophication is just too much nutrients in water. So that's fertilizers from our land. You can use a more organic fertilizer if you're really crazy about getting green grass. But if you're thinking about a garden, you can use compost. So save your organic scraps from your kitchen and throw them into a bin in your backyard with some worms. The worms will eat it all up, poop out some beautiful nutrients for you that you can dump on your garden. It's all stuff that's going into a landfill anyway, and you might as well use it for your garden instead of um, fertilizers that would wash into our waterways regardless. And then plant some trees.
I figure I'll do a quick jump in, maybe do 3 actions on ways to protect your well and your drinking water. So if you are on a well, you're always going to want to give it a quick inspection, take a look at the wellhead, make sure everything is bolted properly, it's not loose, because if the wellhead is not properly, sealed, then surface water runoff has the ability to enter inside. 2 is if you are on a septic system, pump your septic. Make sure you are maintaining your septic properly. Not everybody knows the proper guidelines or the frequencies and things like that. We have a great, I believe it's already on our website as a recording for Septic Smarts. Highly encourage you, if you enjoyed this today, go and take a look at our Septic Smarts webinars. That's already been pre-recorded. Very important for well water because that bacteria can easily infect your well water. And lastly, test. Just test your well. That's probably one of the most important things you could do to see if there are any contamination issues, whether they are from surface water or from just the naturally occurring groundwater itself. Only way you're going to know is to test, but inspecting your well and your septic system are a really great place to start. Not as fun as keeping your pickle juice, but
I
Um,
love all of
oh,
those suggestions. Brian Lynch, thank you for the rewilding, excess lawn areas. We don't need these big expanses of perfectly weeded monocultured lawns. It would be really cool to see a lot of these big lawns renaturalized. Who
I
wrote
just want to
the
say
book?
one thing.
Talamay,
I,
Doug Talamay.
I just put in the chat the Raritan Headwaters link, but there is a tab to click on called Get Involved with a really long, wonderful list of ways that you can volunteer, how you can become river friendly, and also ways to join RHA and make a donation to support our work.
I don't think there are any other questions. Well, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today. This was very exciting. We were very excited to present this webinar to you. We will be getting the State of the Watershed report for 2024 up on our website pretty soon. I will be sending links to that to all of my municipal contacts. I think it's really important for municipal leaders to have that information. So if you have any further questions, comments, reach out. We're happy to help you in any way that we can to protect our most precious natural resource, water. So again, thanks all for being here. Really appreciate it. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye.